Yo, what up gamers? This is the first tutorial I'm doing with a cast, at least publicly. I had to do a Patreon tutorial, so if it takes longer than usual, you know why, but it shouldn't be too bad. Either way, I'm going to be showing you how to do this Chef Boyardee shot from the Chef Boyardee CG Matter thing. If you haven't seen it, go watch it, but this is about compositing. How do you make it look like a can is going outside a thing where in reality that's not what happens? So, footage we are going to be starting with is going to be this. I just recorded this in front of my local Walgreens. I had to get out of there fast. People were looking at me like, what the fuck is wrong with him? Either way, I'm basically at this Walgreens. I have the door open because I'm kind of like off to the side. So that's one piece of footage. And then the other piece of footage is I'm in there and I'm rolling it, okay? But the door is open. So I wanted to combine the ideas of having the door open and the can doing the thing. Either way, let's do it. There's a couple more things to think about, like reflections and all this. I should mention, this is going to be a DaVinci Resolve tutorial, but these compositing ideas work with any program, even with Blender, but you wouldn't want to do it in Blender. So, once you have your compositing program of choice open, I'm using DaVinci because it's free. At least there is a free version, fully featured. Take your footage, drag it in, and I'm going to click change so it picks the frame rate that my footage was in, which in this case, I think is 29.97. Okay, we're going to take this. We are going to put this here, and if you want to import in this footage without the audio track down here, you have to hold down the Alt key. Now, the issue with this is I need to use my tongue because of the left-hand situation, so give me a sec. Yeah, I need to get a fancy mouse. Plus, I don't think licking the keyboard's a good idea. Okay, we've imported in our footage, and I'm just going to select the section of it where the can is rolling out. In fact, it's this section, so just right here. And the thing I was talking about with reflections and all this earlier that we need to take care of, as you can see, you can see me back there like a little gremlin throwing in this Chef Boyardee can, thinking nothing was going to go wrong and that I could finish the sketch. We're going to have to remove him. And by him, I mean me. So play this until the shot's over, and then we can trim it. And this is what we're going to be working with, okay? So this is what we are going to be compositing. And I guess I'm going to have to get rid of me here. So once you have that ready, right-click, New Fusion Clip. This makes it so that frame 1 is at the beginning here, because remember, we trimmed the footage, so it was frame like 1,000 or something before. New Fusion Clip, and then head over to Fusion or whatever compositing thing you're using, okay? If you haven't used Fusion before, long story short, this is the media, in other words, what we had in the timeline, and we're sending it, right? These are nodes, so we are sending it this way to media out. So this is what gets delivered. This is the final thing. So we can do a bunch of node stuff here as long as it reaches here, okay? So we have this thing, but we want the door to be opening at the same time. So let's import in our footage again. This just adds it as a node. You can click this little button right here on the right. I mean, there's two viewers, but we're not going to use the left one. This little button on the right shows us what we're actually watching. And we want to watch this one because we want to pick the section of the footage where the door is opening. So I'm just going to trim this. So this is saying where the end point of the footage is. I could pick this one where the door is opening. However, my dumbass Crocs are getting in the way. So I'm just going to wait for it to happen again later in the footage because I'm sure I do it again. There we go. So that's a clean take. So I'm going to start it right here. And then you can see this is what this footage looks like, okay? So now we need to combine these. To do this, we're gonna take our input node. Again, this is the can rolling shot. Add an emerge node, which you could just do by hitting that button or shift spacebar, type in, not sharp, but merge, E-R-G, and you could add an emerge node. We are gonna merge this video with the door opening clip above it, okay? So green means foreground. So right now, if we were to view this merge result, we're just gonna see the door opening because one is literally like put on top of the other, okay? So we want to see both of these so we can time it. So I'm going to make it 50% transparent. So we're actually seeing both pieces of footage at the same time. And you can see we have a big problem here. Let me see if I can zoom in here, or at least make the window bigger. The problem is the door, if we were to composite this now and do our masking, it would just kind of phase through the door, right? It needs to be more open at the time that it comes here, right? So in other words, we need to time these two to each other. So the good thing is if we're at 50% transparency, we can see kind of like both actions at the same time. I'm going to take the door opening clip, which by the way, we can rename to like whatever we want, but I'm not gonna. I'm just going to take the endpoint and move it just so it's barely open enough once it gets there. Okay, and that's the nice thing about this. You can make it like a really close call, like, you know, like you just dodged a car, but it's lame instead. So there you go. And if you want like the door to be fully closed in the beginning, you want to trim the video and what we did before, you want to trim it so that we have a bit more in the beginning to start with. But you can see this is looking pretty good. So now what we want to say is we want to say, okay, we want to overlay them on top of each other like this. But for the door piece of footage, we only want the door. We don't care about everything else, right? That way we can have both of them be fully visible, okay? To do this, what we are going to do is we are going to add in a mask. In other words, saying where do we want the foreground, where do we want the door, okay? Select the merge node, add in a, what's this called? A Polygon Mask. Basically what this means, blue means mask, by the way. What it means is we can draw in a mask just by, outlining points or making a polygon, I guess. Convex or concave, it does not matter, okay? So I'm going to view. Again, we're going to hit this button to view. We only care about the right. We only care, I'm not political, I swear, I don't know what I was trying to say. We only care about this door piece of footage. So we're viewing it, and with this polygon mask, we can now trace. So I'm just going to click here and click here, and I'm just going to select this whole section because I do still want the reflections and all this from this piece of footage. So the way I want you to think about this as is we are merging them on top of each other. We can now make it like fully opaque. The door is just this section. So if we were to put black over this, right, we're isolating the door and then the can footage is beneath, okay? That is the main idea here. So polygon, we want to view our footage. I'm going to make sure this is roughly the correct shape. And you can't see it right now, but it's already added in a keyframe. Okay, so what we can do is we can go a couple frames down, select this, move it. Doesn't need to be perfect. I mean, perfect is better. And you can see it added in a little keyframe, which you can also see in this keyframe menu. Once you zoom in, there's a good button for that. There you go. You can see all your keyframes, but I'm not going to mess with that. So we got that. Go a couple more frames down. Now, I don't know if this door is a linear motion or not. Does it open at a constant speed? I don't know. If so, you only need one keyframe at the beginning and one at the end if there's some acceleration or deceleration. Is that a word? Then, dude, there was this time in class where I raised my hand in physics and I said deceleration or downwards acceleration and people made fun of me. And I never talked in that physics class again. So that word's a bit triggering to me. No joke. Point is, if it's linear, we only need 2 keyframes, but I'm just going to assume it's not. And keep going a couple frames down, adjusting again. You can gauge whether this is good or not. You can actually go in between keyframes and just adjust it a tiny bit. Really all we care about is the bottom of the door. The top one's not important because the can's only at the bottom. But we keep doing this until, the thing's done. Doesn't need to be perfect. Like that. And let's see what that looks like. So again, we want to view the merged result, which in this case is going to be the same thing as the final output since this is what's being delivered. So we can also view this. And let's play that. There you go. So you can see it's kind of working. We have the idea in place, right? So we have the door moving and we have the can moving at the same shot, fully opaque. Of course, there is an issue, right? Because this thing was so close together, we had the door just open enough at the correct time, you're going to notice, here we go, control, scroll. I hate this thing so much. Because they're so close together, you can see the can, once it reaches the foreground, it's intersecting with that piece of footage. So we're going to need to fix that. Additionally, we have the issue from before that I talked about where I start coming into shot. And by the way, quick tip to reset everything, just click fit. And we also have some stuff behind the glass here I want to hide. But first of all, let's talk about making this can not look garbage, okay? So at this section, what we're going to do is we're going to add in another merge node. And what do we want to do? We want to say take the can and put it in the foreground, because right now it's kind of being clipped a little, right? So if we can re-extract the can and put that on top of all of this, that solves the issue. So again, this is the can piece of footage. We're going to take this, we're going to put it in the foreground. Again, green means foreground. So again, we have our footage, we overlaid the door footage, and now we're overlaying back just the can. I mean, we need to make a mask, but it's going to be the can. So just like last time, create a polygon mask. I'm just going to view the can footage since I don't want to be distracted by anything else. Let's scroll in again. And for this one, we just want to make a very quick mask for the can. Now this really, more so than the door, doesn't need to be precise because there's a lot of motion blur, a lot of softening, and a bunch of other tricks. I mean, that's really it. But there are other tricks that we can do to make this mask look good. So just roughly get it into the correct position. There's already going to be a keyframe. I'm going to go, whoops. I feel like I installed DaVinci 17 and I wonder if some of the hotkeys are different. Either way, I want to go a couple frames back. I tried to use the arrow keys, but it just moved the mask. I'm just going to position it here. That looks pretty good. And by the way, we don't need to do this for the entire shot. In fact, I'm already going overkill. We only need to mask this in the area where it's going to be intersecting the door, because otherwise we don't need to overlay it. So just a couple frames, make sure that it's looking pretty good. I'm thinking we're going to go to frame like 28 or something. But even that, I feel like at this point it might already have cleared the door. Obviously a way to check is we look at this merged result. Yeah, at this point it's already cleared the door, so actually we don't need to go much further than this. So I just want to make sure what I've done so far in the Polygon Mask is pretty good. Yes, that is good. Maybe I'll go one more frame back, just in case. Yeah. Okay. So right now what we have is a mask that puts this back in the foreground. You can see because we're viewing this merged result. Let me hide this. So it doesn't look good right now, but you can see the can's back in the foreground. A couple issues we need to fix. First of all, before this action happens, you're going to see the mask is still there, right? Because we haven't animated it at this point. So we could either like go back a keyframe and then just like, you know, move this off screen. That's not a very elegant solution. So what I propose is we just animate the strength of this, the transparency of overlaying the can. So on this frame, we're going to set blend to 1. This is how you add a keyframe. Let's go one frame back, and we set the blend, in other words, how strong it is, to 0. So it's gone. So invisible, visible, and then we want it to go in front, and then we're going to do the same thing here. So I'm thinking here we add in a keyframe. One frame down, we don't need it anymore. We make it invisible. This way we don't get any issues. So let's see what this looks like from far away. I mean, it's not looking good up close, but from far away, it's already looking pretty good. What we could do to make it look a bit better is we want to modify this mask a little. Sorry for the slow zooming in. We want to modify this mask a little to look good. So first thing to do, soft edge. This is just going to add in feathering uniformly. You want to add in a bit of feathering. You can see that's already blending it a bit. And border width is going to increase or decrease. It's like dilate or erode on the mask. And then final thing you want to do is, especially if you have the keyframes here, so you have motion of these mask points is how motion blur is going to be calculated. You want to go to settings, you want to enable motion blur, and this is just going to calculate motion blur on the mask. And I'm just increasing the quality. So if we view this mask layer, you can see now we have a bit of motion blur. So this is without and this is with. And it tends to help, especially if you have the correct motion and shutter speed and all that picked out. We don't have the correct shutter speed picked out, but that's fine. Okay? Capiche, capiche. So what do we have so far? We have the thing. It's basically a finished shot. And again, the reason it's going to look, I mean, in my opinion, very good is because by definition, we're getting practical elements, right? We're getting the correct reflection as the door opens, the can's like going up and down on this little bump, which is why I wanted to do it for real. I didn't want to do it 3D because it wouldn't look as good. Okay? Cool. Now let's do some final fixes. By the way, we should always save the project. Final fixes. How do we like fix this reflection area in the window? I guess it's not a big deal. I don't know if people would notice it, so you can see I'm kind of running out. But especially, how do we fix this? Well, same trick as every single time, right? We add in another merge node. What do we want to merge on top? So what are we trying to overlay to hide this? Well, I'm just going to select this footage again. You can use the same footage a bunch of times and just select different sections of it. So I'm just going to trim this in for a section where nothing's really going on. So once maybe I exit out of here, I don't know. The reflections are a bit messed up at this area. But this section's pretty good. Okay, so I'm just going to isolate this section right here. So I'm going to overlay this on top. Where do we want this? This time I'm going to use a box mask just because it's a bit faster. I want to overlay this, in other words, hide me running out at roughly this area. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. Final result. Now you can see at this point, whereas before you'd be able to see me running out, now you can't. Cool. A couple things to make it look better. Same tricks as before. You want to soften the edge a bit, not too much, but just so the transition's not so obvious. And we also want to keyframe the transparency of this, because otherwise when the can goes into this section, you can see it gets hidden. So what we can do is we can actually just animate the blending again, so we can have this be invisible to begin with, and then a couple frames down, especially once I enter frame over here, that's when you want it to be fully opaque. And ideally, if you can have a good number of frames between transparent and opaque, the better, because it's a slow transition. It's a slow fade, because otherwise, and this is kind of subtle, but if you imagine the edge of this box mask, you can kind of see the transition. And you could fix that again by adding more softening, by doing a couple more of those tricks. But let's see what that looks like now. Okay, so again, same thing as before, but now you can't see me running out. And finally, let's do the same thing with this window reflection. So these are just the tiny things you do just to get a cohesive shot. I don't know. For this, we could either literally just take a freeze frame of the beginning, or we can wait for like a car to come in. It's kind of up to you. You could just pick any section of the reflection. I like this one because there's cars passing through, so that piece of footage. Although there is a dude right there, so we just got to reel it back a couple frames. So this is just the idea of taking pieces of footage from different times is the idea, okay? So let's just do this quickly. We merge this on top. We add in a mask. Where do we want the mask? We just want it here. So we're going to isolate the window. We're going to soften it a bit. And let's view the output. So again, this is just adding in a different reflection here. And let's play that. Okay, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty good. At this point, there's different modifications and stuff you can do just to clean it up a bit more. You can tighten up the masks, you can do whatever. But in some sense, it's a finished shot. So let me just go over like the final things I did to make it look like a Chef Boyardee commercial. The first thing I did is I said, okay, this thing, wait, let's go to OBS here. Now I have control. I've switched from NVIDIA screen recorder. I don't know. It's a good one, but OBS just has all this sharpness and I can switch scenes. And hopefully that, whatever. Why the fuck did I go to full screen? I swear I had a point to this. The way I made it look like a commercial, that's the point. It's this old thing that has this like 1:1 or 4:3 aspect ratio. It's super sharp, it's super noisy. So these are the things we want to replicate in our composite, okay? So let's close OBS here. Not close, that would end the recording. But so how do we do that? Well, first of all, we will want to add in some sharpening because that's what makes it look like old footage. So you just type in sharp. Again, shift spacebar to open up this search menu. I'm just going to add in a sharpen, and we have this slider that lets us control how much sharpening. I found that something like 2 is overkill, maybe. So something between 1 and 2 is pretty good. So again, you want to throw this at the end of your composite. So first we do all this merging, the masks, whatever. Then we sharpen. So hierarchy and order matters. We sharpen. To get the aspect ratio thing, I'm just going to fake it. I'm just going to add in some black bars. It's not actually a different aspect ratio. So to do that, we just select the last node. We can merge a black solid layer, or a fast way to do that is you select this, you click this button, which adds in a merge node and a background node, which in other words is like, you know, a color that we can pick, right? So it could be any shade of whatever, but I do want it to be black in this case. And to, you know, merge these together, I want to use a box mask again, making sure the height is full. By the way, we can invert this as a quick way. And now our width slider is essentially an aspect ratio slider. Again, this is a cheese, it's a fake, but whatever. If you want a 1:1 mathematically correct aspect ratio, a good way to calculate that is, since this footage is 1920 by 1080, in other words, it is, I'll just show you, it's 1.778. I've done this calculation a bunch of times. The aspect ratio, right, width over height, is this. If we want it to be a square, we need the reciprocal. So take 1 over x, 1 divided by 1.778, and we get 0.562. What that number represents is the number we need to put in for the width, so like 0.63, whatever. It's the number we need to put in to make this a square. You can think about why that's true, but it is true. So now we have a 1:1 aspect ratio. I don't know if I necessarily want it, but it exists. And, you know, if you just want to reposition the footage, before we do this overlaying, so again, order matters, I'm going to add in a transform node. So in other words, we can change the position of this, and then we're adding in the black bars. So you just want to kind of like shift this so that, you know, you're reframing your shot. Again, in my case, I don't necessarily want, I want something closer to 4:3, which again, you can calculate using a calculator. But there you go. Okay. Final thing, maybe let's add a bit of film grain on top of the whole thing. In this case, you know, one thing I do want to do, just a minor correction. I'm seeing that this mask is a bit expansive. You can kind of see the edge here. So let's just go back to the mask. I assume it is this one. No, that's the door mask. It's always a good idea to make naming conventions, but whatever. I'm just going to eat into this mask a little, and you can see that just cleans it up a little. Because I shot this outdoors and there's already very low noise to begin with, the final thing I want to do is just slap noise over the whole thing, and it should be roughly the same noise everywhere, because well, whatever. I filmed it for real is the point. So again, before the black bar, so we did the sharpening, the not the cropping, but the readjusting, and now we're gonna do film grain. Usually it's whatever. Like if you want grain, you just type in grain, and usually the naming convention makes sense. I'm just gonna add in, I think it's this one. You could try out different ones. I add in this film grain. I'm going to bring the opacity all the way up so we can see it. And then the grain strength is a good. And by the way, YouTube compression might ruin this a little. So you might not be able to see, but here's super intense so you can see. You just want to pick a good level of grain. It depends on how insane you want it to be. I would recommend adding in film grain after the sharpening, because if you put it before the sharpening, it gets insane because even the grain gets sharpened. But either way, you know, that's a shot. I mean, we could also do a bit of color correction and stuff like this. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, the main idea is the masking and all this. So we've done a finished shot. Very cool. That's how I composited a 1 to 2 second shot in the actual Chef Boyardee video, so you can see why it took so long. I mean, most of the shots were 3D, so they took substantially longer. But either way, now you know how to do this compositing thing in DaVinci, so I hope you learned something. And what is this to the side? Is it a list of what? People who are going to sign my cast? No. Is it a list of types of trees? I don't know. No, it's a list of patrons. So I want to say thank you to all the patrons, especially recently. There's a lot of people who joined probably out of pity, but I'm trying to deliver good stuff. These are a list of patrons. They get access to the videos earlier in some cases. So I think this video I'm going to make early access. They get exclusive tutorials at different tiers, tutorials that I do not post to this channel or the CG Matter channel. Additionally, Discord access, behind the scenes, project files, all of these things you can get over on the Patreon. There's a link in the description if you want to check it out. But since I'm not doing sponsors anymore, I got to push this thing a bit. So Patreon exists. Hopefully you learned something in this tutorial. I'll see if I can, I don't know if I can publish this project file on the Patreon because it's a DaVinci file, but I'll mess around with it. Either way, I think I'm done with this. One-handed recording isn't too bad. I'm going to get myself a new mouse that has buttons on the side so I don't have to use my tongue to hit the Alt key. But that's the essence of it. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.